A heavy woolen cloak scrapes against the rough limestone of a Jerusalem alleyway. The man wearing it keeps to the absolute edges of the street. He shows up exactly 3 times in the record. Same shadows, same hesitation, same agonizing, deliberate tension. The real question of this midnight meeting: he pulls the iron nails. He lowers the torn flesh. And then, another man steps onto the bloody hill. It is Nicodemus. He no longer hides in the shadows of the alleyway. He walks straight into the open violence of a Roman execution site. He does not come empty-handed. John chapter 19, verse 39. He brings a mixture of myrrh and aloes. The Greek word John uses for this compound is migma. It means a precise blend, a specific combining of burial elements. The myrrh is a sticky, fragrant tree resin. The aloes are an imported aromatic wood. Together, they carry a sharp, overwhelming, piney scent that immediately cuts through the smell of blood and sweat. But the detail that stops you cold is the sheer volume. John specifically notes the weight: 100 Roman pounds, roughly 75 modern pounds of raw spices. He is carrying an absolute fortune in his arms. He is hauling the physical weight of a grown man up a skull-shaped hill. This amount of migma is absurd. Normal Judean burials use perhaps 5 or 10 pounds of spices. It is just enough to mask the smell of decay in a hot climate. 100 pounds is exorbitant. It is reckless. It is reserved for one specific class of people in the ancient world. Isn't why he came in the dark. It's this: how does a man dismantle his entire life without making a sound? His arrival in the dark. When royal figures like King Herod died, historians recorded that their bodies were processed with massive quantities of aromatics. This is not a traditional burial. It is a coronation. Nicodemus is publicly anointing a king. He is dumping a king's ransom of myrrh over the mutilated corpse of a crucified criminal. He is coating the torn flesh of a Galilean with the fragrance of royalty. The man who once hid in the pitch black of night is now working in the fading afternoon light. He kneels in the dirt. He is stained with the blood of a condemned traitor. He takes the heavy, sticky resin. He presses it into the linen strips. He binds the arms. He wraps the torso. He is completely burning the bridge to his old life. Every single Pharisee in Jerusalem will know exactly what he has done. The overwhelming scent of that myrrh will cling to his skin and his clothes for weeks. But the sheer volume of the spices is only half the story. The physical action of wrapping this specific body triggers an ancient legal tripwire, and it means Nicodemus has just crossed a boundary he can never uncross. Is not an act of cowardice. It is the beginning of an autopsy. He is examining a theological system he has spent a lifetime building. To touch a corpse in first-century Judea was to step across an invisible, absolute line of ritual defilement. According to the strict regulations of Numbers chapter 19, anyone who touches the dead body of a human being is rendered completely unclean for 7 days. For a common agricultural laborer, it was a profound inconvenience that required days of isolation and ritual washing. But for a ruling Pharisee, the master teacher of Israel, it was a catastrophic loss of identity. An unclean Pharisee could not walk the polished stone floors of the temple courts. An unclean Pharisee could not sit in the heavy cedar chairs of the Sanhedrin. An unclean Pharisee could not participate in the sacred, communal feasts of his people. And the exact timing of this moment is the detail that changes everything. The sun is sinking fast over the limestone walls. The shadows are lengthening rapidly across the Kidron Valley, and the Sabbath twilight is rushing in. It is Friday evening. The Passover is beginning. Across the crowded, noisy city of Jerusalem, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims are washing their hands in cold bronze basins, preparing their homes, and gathering around tables to eat the unblemished lambs. But Nicodemus is up to his elbows in coagulated blood, torn flesh, and the sticky, overwhelming sap of myrrh. By choosing to physically wrap the mutilated body of this crucified Galilean, Nicodemus is intentionally, openly disqualifying himself from the highest, realizing the body is cold, and desperately searching for a pulse. Nicodemus has everything a religious man could possibly want. He has mastered the Torah, holiest day of the Jewish calendar. He is actively choosing the defilement of a Roman execution ground over the pristine safety of the temple. He is trading his flawless ritual purity for the bleeding reality of the cross. The defilement is not a tragedy. It is an arrival. He has finally realized that the magnificent architecture of his religious system is just a shadow, and the substance is the broken man he is holding in his arms. The other 70 elders of the High Council are safely back in the city, perfectly clean, eating a symbolic lamb in comfortable rooms, utterly unaware that the true Passover has just been slaughtered on the wood outside their gates. Nicodemus gives up his seat at their spotless table to kneel in the dirt. He has allowed the rigid, perfect scaffolding of his Pharisaical life to completely collapse, and he does not care who sees the ruin. But that radical choice does not just stay buried in a first-century garden. The implication of his long, agonizing defilement points directly at the quietest spaces of our own experience. The altar call is loud. The raised hand is immediate. The tear-stained face in the brightly lit auditorium is the standard metric of a changed heart in our modern culture. We celebrate the sudden, cinematic conversions. He knows the Levitical purifications. He knows the exact, permissible distance a man can travel on the Sabbath without breaking the law of Moses. We want the before and after neatly packaged, spoken into a microphone, finalized in a single, dramatic moment. But Nicodemus offers a radically different paradigm. He offers the agonizing, terrifying blueprint of a slow faith. You might be sitting in a wooden pew right now, holding a theology that feels increasingly like a tight straitjacket. You feel the constant, grinding friction. You hear the sermons that drop from the pulpit like perfectly polished stones. But you realize they no longer heal the bleeding, messy cuts of your actual life. You smell the familiar incense of your tradition. But suddenly, it just smells like dry dust. The modern religious system often demands daylight compliance. It demands that you have all the answers ready. It demands that you smile, nod, and never ask the question that stops the music. But the text gives you absolute permission to be in the nu-ex. The text gives you permission to knock on the door when you do not have the vocabulary to explain what is breaking inside of you. The questions keeping you awake are not a sign of your rebellion. They are the coordinates of your rebirth. We are terrified of the dark room. We are terrified of the doubts that take 3 years to process. We want the instant migma, the immediate anointing, the sudden clarity. But the polished marble floor of the temple has started to feel profoundly empty. He has seen the signs. He has seen water turn to wine. But the man who hauled the 100 pounds of spices up the bloody hill did not buy them on day one. He had to sit in the suffocating tension. He had to measure the distance between the comfortable cedar chairs of his religious empire and the violent truth of the Galilean. He had to let the wind blow through the cracks of his broken paradigm until the whole structure finally gave way. Nicodemus proves that God does not panic over your hesitation. God does not rush your theological crisis. Jesus sits in the dim room with the oil lamp flickering. He lets the Pharisees struggle. He lets the proud ruler leave in silence. He lets him watch from the absolute edges of the crowd for 3 entire years. He does not force the timeline. A slow faith is not a weak faith. It is a tested one. You are allowed to take the midnight walk. You are allowed to carry your heavy, unresolved questions into the dark alleyway, while the rest of your tribe sleeps securely in their absolute certainties. You are allowed to carefully count the terrifying cost of leaving the system you were born into. Because when you trace the complete journey of this Pharisee from the pitch black to the bloody dirt, a stunning pattern emerges, and it changes exactly how you see the God waiting in the shadows, and the money changers driven from the sacred courts. And it has completely broken his paradigm. Jesus is not offering this Pharisee a polite philosophical debate. The sun sinks completely behind the limestone walls of Jerusalem. The blood on the heavy wooden beam begins to dry in the cold evening wind. A Pharisee with myrrh stained deep into his skin walks away from a sealed tomb. The Sabbath begins, and for the first time in his entire life, he is unclean. A ruler knocked on a door in the pitch black, and the entire scaffolding of his life began to collapse. A teacher defended justice in a hostile courtroom, and the first crack in his armor appeared. A Pharisee stood in the margins for 3 agonizing years, and let his perfect paradigm slowly die. A wealthy man hauled 100 pounds of royal spices up a bloody hill and anointed a crucified king. A scholar pressed sticky myrrh into torn flesh and completely burned the bridge to his ancient tribe. A priest disqualified himself from the holiest Passover of his life and found the true lamb outside the gates. A man who once hid in the shadows traded his pristine ritual purity and walked away holding the bleeding reality of God. One thread, one story. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the sheer weight of the spices. 100 pounds of myrrh and aloes, carried by a man who used to hold his breath in the dark alleyways. He is diagnosing a disease. He is looking at a man who has reached the absolute pinnacle of human religious achievement, only to discover the fortune in his arms was not a sudden, emotional impulse. It was the agonizing, 3-year accumulation of a man who finally counted the absolute cost of his own undoing and bought a king's ransom anyway. If you are in a season where your certainty is crumbling, where the rigid walls of your tradition are falling apart, and you are terrified of the dark, do not panic. The kingdom is not a theology exam you have to pass in the daylight. It is a rebirth that often begins in the pitch black. And may the God who never once rushed the midnight traveler walk with you through your own unspooling and bring you out into the light, carrying something infinitely more beautiful than what you left behind. If this opens something up for you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is quietly dismantling the system they were handed. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, that the ladder he spent decades climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. But to feel the true, crushing weight of what is about to happen in that dark room, you have to understand what this man is actually putting on the line just by knocking on the door, his leather sandals stepping carefully to avoid the moonlight spilling between the crowded, flat-roofed houses. You can hear the low howl of the wind. To understand the sheer gravity of a single conversation, we have to look at the religious architecture of 1st century Jerusalem. The Sanhedrin was not just a council of theologians debating ancient texts. It was the cultural epicenter of an occupied nation. Imagine the Supreme Court, the National Senate, and the highest religious authority all compressed into 71 seats of polished stone. These were men who wore their authority like heavy armor, their fringes sweeping the dust, their robes carrying the lingering, sharp scent of temple frankincense wherever they walked. They dictated the absolute rhythms of life for the Jewish people under the crushing boot of Rome. They determined what was clean and what was unclean, who belonged to the family of God and who was cast into the outer margins of society. When a Pharisee of this rank walked through the bustling marketplace, the chaotic crowds parted, the noise quieted, and the people bowed in reverence. Nicodemus is a cardinal in a world that executes heretics, and John explicitly tells us his title. He is not just a teacher among many. In the original Greek text, Jesus refers to him with the definite article, he is the teacher of Israel. He represents the pinnacle of an exhausted, rigid system of law that measures human righteousness by the precise counting of cumin seeds and the rigorous washing of bronze pots. Moving through the Kidron Valley, carrying the sharp scent of dust and cold stone. He is not a zealot looking for a rebellion. The Pharisees had built a fortress of rules to protect the Torah, a massive ideological wall designed to keep Israel pure. But the walls had become a prison. In this ancient Hebrew culture, your identity was intricately woven into your social standing and your theological alignment. To step outside the accepted orthodoxy, to even entertain the radical teachings of an uncredentialed carpenter from a backwater town like Nazareth, was not a minor lapse in judgment. It was intellectual and social suicide. To be expelled from the synagogue was to suffer a complete and devastating social death, where your income dried up and even your family might treat you as though you were already buried in the ground. Nicodemus is not a curious spiritual seeker with an empty resume. He is a man holding the keys to the entire cultural kingdom. He has wealth. He has profound influence. And he has the respect of the highest men in the land. To seek out Jesus is to risk the total collapse of the very scaffolding that holds his life together. It is an act of quiet, terrifying rebellion against his own tribe. He knows the danger. He knows the other 70 rulers are already gathering theological stones, sharpening their arguments, waiting for the perfect moment to trap this rogue rabbi. Yet he goes anyway, because something in the established system is quietly starving. He is not a blind beggar desperate for a miracle. He is a ruler of the Jews, a master teacher of Israel, a man who's him to death. But the detail that changes how we view this midnight conversation is hidden in the exact language John uses to set the scene. John chapter 3, verse 2. Nicodemus steps into the small room. The oil lamp flickers. The shadows dance against the rough clay walls. You can smell the burning flax of the wick. He looks at the Galilean. He speaks his first carefully rehearsed words. Rabbi, we know you are a teacher, come from God. Jesus does not thank him. Jesus does not offer a seat. Jesus does not engage in polite rabbinic debate. He shatters the ice immediately. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. John tells us this meeting happens by night. The word in the text is the Greek nix. It means literal darkness. But John never uses darkness merely to tell the hour. In this gospel, nix is the absolute realm of spiritual blindness. Judas leaves the upper room to betray his rabbi, and John specifically notes it was nixus. Peter denies Jesus by a charcoal fire, and it is nix. Nicodemus is not just walking under the stars. He is walking in the dark of his own theology. He is utterly lost. Fringed garments announce his power and theological supremacy to anyone who sees him. And he is moving through the pitch black to find a homeless rabbi. And Jesus throws him a lifeline hidden in a single word. You must be born again. The word English Bibles translate as again is the Greek anothen. It is a word with a deliberate, brilliant double meaning. It can mean again, as in repeating a physical action. A second time, chronological repetition, but it's primary. Deeper root means from above, from a higher place, from the divine. It is the exact same word John uses later to describe the seamless garment of Jesus. Woven anothen from the top down. Nicodemus hears the first meaning. He thinks of biology. He thinks of flesh. He thinks of physical wombs. He thinks of an old man trying to restart the exact same life. He asks how a man can possibly be born when he is old. Jesus is speaking the second meaning. Jesus thinks of spirit. Jesus thinks of heaven. Jesus thinks of the breath of God moving like wind through the valley. The kingdom is not a renovation project. It is an entirely new creation. Nicodemus leaves that room in silence. The text does not record his departure. He just fades back into the pitch black. The wind blows. The heavy wooden door closes. The conversation feels completely unresolved. The wealthy ruler came looking for a theological patch for his torn system. And Jesus told him the whole garment was dead. It looks like a total failure. But that echo does not stop there. Most people assume they know exactly what this scene is about. The traditional reading is almost universally agreed upon. He is the coward. Months pass, perhaps even years. We jump to John chapter 7, and the landscape has drastically shifted. The Sanhedrin is no longer just annoyed. They are actively orchestrating a murder. The High Council has gathered in the unforgiving daylight. Surrounded by the heavy cedar pillars of their judgment chambers, they have dispatched armed temple guards to arrest Jesus during the bustling, chaotic Feast of Tabernacles. But the guards return empty-handed, utterly mesmerized by his words. Carrying nothing but reports of his teaching, the room erupts in furious, aristocratic outrage. The chief priests scoff at the guards, mocking the uneducated crowds who follow this carpenter, cursing the common people who do not know the law. The tension in the chamber is thick enough to choke on. And then, A single voice cuts through the venomous murmurs. It is the Pharisee who came in the night. He asks a simple, procedural question. Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? So the room immediately turns on him. They sneer at him, demanding to know if he is also from Galilee. The insult is profound and intentional. To associate a Judean master teacher with the rural, unrefined region of Galilee. He is the wealthy politician, too terrified of losing his comfortable seat on the high council to be seen speaking with a Galilean radical in the daylight, is to strip away his theological credibility in real time. But notice what is happening under the surface of the text. Nicodemus is stepping out of the absolute darkness and into the treacherous, dangerous, gray. He is using the very legal structure of the Pharisees, the system he knows inside and out, to stall their murderous intent. He appeals to the Torah itself, citing the ancient statutes of Deuteronomy, to demand a fair trial for a man they have already condemned in their hearts. His objection is not a bold, cinematic declaration of faith. It is a calculated, terrifying crack in his religious armor. He does not yet defend the theology of the Galilean, but he risks his prestigious seat at the table to defend the justice owed to him. For a man entrenched in the highest echelons of religious power, in a culture that demands absolute ideological purity, this single, quiet question is a violent earthquake. He is publicly breaking ranks with the 70 most powerful men in his nation. The seed planted during that midnight conversation is taking root, breaking apart the concrete of his lifelong certainty, millimeter by millimeter. There is the psychological cost to leaving a high-control religious system, and Nicodemus is beginning to pay the first installments of that debt. But the part that makes this remarkable is what happens when the final bill comes due. You have likely heard the sermons framing him as the ultimate hypocrite, the man who wanted the kingdom but categorically refused the cost. We demand instant transformation from biblical characters. We want the cinematic montage. We want the wealthy to instantly drop their gold in the dust. We want Nicodemus to stand up, flip the heavy wooden table in the Sanhedrin, throw his fringed cloak on the polished marble floor, and walk out into the bright Judean sunlight. But human beings rarely dismantle their entire lives in a single dramatic motion. We dismantle them by agonizing inches. If you have ever been on the inside of a tight, high-control religious community, you know, the exact freezing temperature of the room when a dissenting question is asked, you know, the sudden quiet, you know, the physical weight settling in your chest when you realize the pristine answers you were handed no longer fit the messy, bleeding reality of the world you are living in. You know the cold sweat of standing on the edge of the theological boundary line, looking over the cliff into the unknown. Leaving a system that built your entire worldview is a terrifying unspooling. You are not just changing your mind about an abstract doctrine. You are changing your emergency contacts. You are losing the people who brought warm meals to your front door when your family was sick. You are losing the comfortable certainty of knowing exactly who the righteous are and exactly who the wicked are. You can physically feel the sideways glances. But if you look closer at the text, if you track this man's specific, calculated appearances through the Gospel of John, a very different narrative emerges. You can hear the hushed whispers echoing in the hallway after you walk past. This is the phantom cost of leaving. You do not just walk away from a theology. You walk away from a tribe. This is what makes the slow, quiet progression of Nicodemus so profoundly human, so devastatingly relatable. He is holding the agonizing tension in his jaw. He is carefully measuring the cost of his own undoing. The Sanhedrin was demanding absolute compliance, but Jesus was demanding absolute rebirth. A slow faith is not an invalid faith. It is a faith counting the cost. And for Nicodemus, that profound cognitive dissonance takes 3 years to process. 3 years of standing in the margins. 3 years of watching the Galilean heal the blind and anger the powerful. 3 years of the wind blowing through the cracks of his broken paradigm. The decision lingers in the shadows of his mind until the terrible Friday afternoon when the sky finally turns pitch black. and the ground begins to violently shake. Because the third time he appears, the shadows are gone, and he is carrying something entirely unexpected. The sky goes dark over Golgotha. The crowds scatter. The executioners break the legs of the thieves. The centurion pierces aside. Blood and water spill into the dirt. The wood is slick. Jesus is dead. Joseph of Arimathea asks for the body.